Number one on the anti-inflammatory lifestyle list is healthy fats. So number one, eat healthy fats. Remember that fat is good, and please remember it and remember it and remember it. Fat is good. Whisper it in your mind. Fat is good. In the West, in the United States, fat has been demonized. We have fat phobia. We think eating fat means that you will become fat. I think a lot of that's changing now with these keto trends that are coming through, which is a good thing, but we want to know what that means. What is fat, and how can we improve on that? So always remember, fat is good, and two essential fatty acids are omega-3s and omega-6s, which we just kind of reviewed in our arachidonic acid pathway and how fats are formed and how it becomes inflammatory. But we want to stress and kind of look at these things and see what's going on. So just wanted to point out that omega-6s in the Western diet are about 50 to 20 times more than we should be eating. Okay, it's a ratio. And this is essentially kind of that same inflammatory pathway or anti-inflammatory pathway. I've just got them flip-flopped. Remember, the 3s were over here and the 6s were over here, and now we've got a flip-flop where the 6s are over on this side and the omega-3s are on this side. So just wanted you to be aware of what's going on. The ratios, I kind of want to make sure of the ratios as well too. So when we're talking about 4-to-1 or 1-to-1, what I mean is that the 6 ratio to 1 to the 3 ratio, omega-3. So when we're talking about omega-3s to 6s, the ratio should be more of 4 parts omega-6s to 1 part omega-3, or even if you can, 1 part omega-6 to 1 part omega-3. And what we mean by the standard American diet has a ratio of 15-to-1 or 20-to-1. That means that the standard American diet's eating 6 omega-3 ratios to 3. So every 15, you're eating 1 of omega-3. So hopefully that makes it nice and clear of what I mean. So yeah, linoleic acid, we talked about that, right? So things like corn oil, or what's another example? Vegetable oil or soybean oil. Those things are high in omega-6s. They're not necessarily horrible for you, but it's just that ratio. So how I want you to think about it is a teeter-totter or kind of like a teeter-totter, right? Like if you want to lean real heavy on the 6s, your inflammation's going to go up. If you go the other way, if you want to lean really high on the omega-3s, your anti-inflammatory pathway kicks in. So let's talk about that. So what is an omega-3? Let's talk about the good fats. Let's talk about omega-3s. Remember, fat is good. Fat is good. Omega-3s, an example of an omega-3 is extra virgin olive oil or olive oil. Olive oils are rich in polyphenols, which is an antioxidant, and they're actually effective in decreasing blood pressure. There's a trial that had 2 to 4 tablespoons of olive oil taken daily, and they actually effectively decreased the trial patients' blood pressures. There's another trial that showed a reduction in lipid profiles by reducing LDL and increasing or improving HDL, that good cholesterol. And there's another trial that also helped with olive oil consumption, helped improve endothelial function. So endothelial function means the lining of the blood vessels. They actually improved endothelial function. That's usually the endothelial functions get dysfunctional when we think about a heart attack, right? Those tiny blood vessels that are around the heart, they get clot formation, and that's how we end up getting myocardial infarction. So those can be improved too. So these are all things that we can modulate with food. There are suitable vegetable oil options. There are other vegetable oil options out there that I can definitely vouch for coconut oil being a saturated fat, and that there's been evidence that that saturated fat like coconut oil, extra virgin coconut oil specifically, has higher polyphenols in it, which is an antioxidant that is of benefit. So there are different parts of the world that have diets that are rich in coconut oil that don't have cardiovascular disease, and that's part of the reason why. So, and we can discuss this further in a different talk. Another example of omega-3s is fish. So try to eat smash fish. So what is smash fish? What does that mean? It's an acronym that I like to talk about and use with my patients a lot when we talk about fish. So salmon, mackerel, anchovies, sardines, and herrings stand for smash. So I try to hone this in on people because they say, oh, I eat tuna. Tuna is great, but tuna is a big fish, a much larger fish. The larger fish live a lot longer, so they'll end up absorbing a lot more of the toxins in the ocean, which end up having to do with a lot of mercury, and really you should leave that for eating once a month. If you are a child or of childbearing age or pregnant, you really should avoid any of the larger fish completely. But smash fish you can do. Smash fish you can do twice a week. Some examples, because all my patients always want to ask, well, what does that mean? How do I eat it? So salmon, please eat salmon that's wild caught. I know it's not really sustainable because our sources of fisheries are going down, but farmed fish end up having a dye in them. So that pink color that you get when you get a farmed salmon is a dye. Really the farmed fish end up getting fed grain, and that grain ends up decreasing the pinkness in the color of the fish. And what they do is a food trick. They add a dye in there to make it look nice and pink so that you want to buy it, so you recognize that that's salmon, so that you want to put it on your dinner plate, and you really don't want to do that. So if you have the luxury of buying salmon, try to buy wild caught. It is a seasonal food, and so it's not always available. This particular company, a great company, it's Wild Mackerel. This is about $4 or max of $5 that I've seen online. It's even cheaper. Very affordable, very easy to find, very, very sustainably caught, and very easy to eat. Anchovies, I like this particular brand. This is another wild caught King Oscar. Anchovies are great fish that you can actually use as a spice, a salted spice, which we like doing a lot. And another example is the seasoned brand sardines, amazing. Some of them will be in olive oil, some of them will be in tomato. So if you can eat tomato, that's a great way to eat it. And I think this one was like $1 or something like that. These are really, really cheap. They're very, very cheap. And by the way, if any of these canned fish ever expire, you can actually take them out and take them to your garden, dump them into a hole, and plant something there. They become a great source of nitrogen for your plants, so it actually it's never a waste, okay? And another example is this Blue Bay herring. This one is in the cold section, so another great fish product to purchase. So try to do this twice a week. This is a great source of omega-3s. There are plant-based, so if you go plant-based, by all means, please do so. The caveat with plant-based omegas is that our omega-3 conversion from that alpha-linoleic acid is about less than 5 to 10% for EPA and about 2 to 5% for DHA. So our body actually is very inefficient in taking that alpha-linoleic acid and converting it all the way down to EPA and DHA. By converse, what the cool thing about fish is, it already has a high quantities of EPA and DHA. So that's where we differ on plant-based versus animal-based omegas. You end up having to have a lot of plant-based sources, okay? So the total omega-3 requirements may be much higher for a vegetarian than a non-vegetarian. as vegetarians must rely on that conversion from the alpha-linoleic all the way down to that pathway of EPA and DHA. And so because of the beneficial effects of omega-3 acids, it's recommended that vegetarians generally have a supplementation, like a specific dietary change in optimizing what the quantity, really quantifying how many cups of what you're going to eat, or supplementation. Okay, so the examples that I have in here are flax. So this is a flax seed, and when you buy whole flax, it's much better. Whole flax will not spoil, and you grind it when you eat it. So take that spice grinder and grind it and dump it into your oatmeal if that's how you're eating it. This is chia. Flax oil is another. You can get flax oil, but remember that it spoils real easily. This is chia over here. This is chia pudding. It's an excellent source of plant-based omegas, and this is hemp seeds. So in our part of the world, in Nepal, and I know in India, we have hemp seeds that are found whole, and they're unhulled. But here in the United States, they worry about growing hemp, and it was illegal, then it's illegal, and now it's legal again, so they actually hull all of them, which I don't really prefer. I actually like the whole seeds better, but they've got the hulled, that's why they look this way. Another great source of omegas. And if you are a vegan, you absolutely will have to, 100% will have to supplement. So, I'll say this again and again and again. Veganism is not a sustainable lifestyle without supplementation. One has to supplement if they're a vegan. This being one of the places. If you're not getting enough of these omega-3s, then you have to supplement. And that Nordic Naturals, it's a relatively good brand. There's other omega algae out there, but algae omega 3s are basically what the fish eat. So you're eating what the fish are eating, and so you're getting that in a capsule form. Other plant-based sources of omega-3s are avocados, walnuts, nut butters. This is Artisana. I like this brand because it just is really clean. It's got nothing else in there but the nut itself, and then you can take it to go as a snack. Basically, if you eat this and a glass of water, or with an apple or something, it turns out to be a really fantastic meal. Brassica, like broccoli or cauliflower, and Brussels sprouts and kales and collards and all those things also have. It has a good amount of omega-3s in it, but again, it's plant-based. Edamame, which is a soybean, has omega-3s, and seaweed is another source of that. So if you're an oil restrictor or raw foodie, or you don't eat meat, you want to make sure beef and really bulk up this plant-based sources of omega-3s. Young coconut is another one I didn't put on here, but young coconut and old coconut are also great forms of, again, it's a saturated fat, but you need that very much so. Very, very much so. And this part of the section, people always ask me about saturated fats and if they can eat butter. And, while butter is still really controversial in how much should we eat it or not, it's really not bad for you when you eat the real thing. There are a lot of fake butters out there. If you just, obviously for the vegans, they don't touch any of this stuff, but for people that were in the old school thinking of avoiding all saturated fats, so then you can grab that butter substitute. I actually prefer this better if you can just do the real thing. Make sure you purchase butter that is cultured. Usually that Qualitarian Alert, usually butter will have what's called natural flavors in it. I don't know what they are. I don't know what they consist of. Don't buy that stuff. Make sure that it's, real milk that's cultured or real cream. It's usually cultured cream. And, it's going to be a lot more satisfying. You're going to have less cravings. You're going to have less side effects from the flavoring and flavor additives that they put in it. Clarified butter is another one. Clarified butter is a really great source of fat. If you have high cholesterol, you may not want to do it in high amounts, but it can make you very satisfied. It reduces your sugar cravings. So clarified butter or ghee, we call it ghee or gyu in Nepal, ghee in the Indian subcontinent, is a great source of fat as long as you reduce. And then let's talk about omega-6s. So omega-6s aren't necessarily bad, but remember it's the ratio. It is that ratio of how much you're eating. So remember you want to eat, instead of that 25 or 50 to 1 of omega-6s to omega-3s, you want to get that down to about 4 to 1 or even 1 to 1 if possible. So omega-6s, there's soybean oil, sunflower oil, corn oil, vegetable oil. These are all fine and great to eat. Again, you want to cut this down as much as possible and try to switch your oils around to maybe olive oil. There are bad omegas, though. Trans fats or partially hydrogenated vegetable oils. They used to be found in a lot of the processed foods in the United States. The FDA actually put out an alert saying that the foods were going to be, processed foods were going to be banned of all the PHOs or the partially hydrogenated vegetable oils. They did actually follow the compliance on January 1, 2020. And have removed it from the marketplace, but I don't know what the status is in other countries out there. This is a very dangerous fat. It's a liquid fat that's chemically converted to a solid form, and can last a lot longer on the shelf. It increases serolipoprotein A, it increases triglycerides. It's terrible for cardiovascular health and should not be eaten. It is absolute trash. So I don't know if this is one of those things that have been exported from the United States over to the rest of the world, but please do not eat trans fat. And they've renamed it and repurposed it into partially hydrogenated vegetable oil. It's the same thing. It's just they used to call it trans fat, but they've repurposed the name. So if you see anything on a label that says partially hydrogenated vegetable oil, do not eat it. For completeness sake, there's omega-3s or omega-6s and omega-9s. So omega-9 is not an essential fatty acid. Meaning that your body can make this out of 3s and 6s. But some examples of foods that have it are olive oil, olives, raw nuts, and avocados. So, those food products are not solitary. They don't have one specific type of fat. They have multiple types of fats. So that's just an example. And peanuts, remember, is not a nut. It is a legume, so that would not count. Number 2, we're on the number 2 list. Eat lots of vegetables and fruit. I can't stress this enough. And the biggest portion of this is that there's been some trends. I see some patients with taking supplementation of whole vegetables or whole fruits. There's some brands out there that carry supplementation that's in a pill. It's really not the same. Don't underestimate the richness of nutrients and antioxidants and vitamins and minerals that are found in your whole food. It is way more superior than any one isolated nutrient. So I call this nature's pharmacy, and spices are also nature's pharmacy, but I definitely call this a must of what you need to eat. An example of how a food is a lot more rich in the food of the whole than the component itself is this particular food. Everyone knows what this is. This is an orange, and everyone knows that the vitamin that you can get out of an orange is vitamin C. Everyone knows that. But did you know that an orange has about 60 other flavonoids in there, 20 carotenoids, and limonoids in the actual fruit, the whole fruit itself. So this is an example of how food in its natural form is way more superior to any one isolated ingredient. So, I'm not chiding anybody for saying, I'm going to take a vitamin C supplementation today because I don't feel so well. But really, the best thing is to eat an orange. Sit down and peel an orange, sit in the sun, you'll get some vitamin D, and eat an orange. That's what we do in Nepal in the winter months. We get some vitamin C from a citrus. We sit out in the porch, or get a blanket and we get some sun and we eat some C's and we absorb some D's. Great for winter health. Other examples of vitamin C, these are other examples, rose hips and sea buckthorn and kiwis and papayas and guavas. All of these are higher in vitamin C sources. And, another example is vitamin C in the actual vitamin C, in food can actually lower CRP. It can actually lower TPA. And TPA, which is a tissue plasminogen activator, is a major enzyme in busting clots. And it's given as a medication in high amounts to stroke patients. But sources in high vitamin C foods actually are associated with lowering both CRP and TPA. Fascinating, isn't it? So that you can actually treat yourself and heal yourself with food. Vegetables. So make sure you eat the rainbow of vegetables. Vegetables, usually get cut into the carb list. I know people that do Weight Watchers or other things, and they usually get chalked into a carb and they get whittled away. Like, for example, another example is keto-based eating. Oh, this one has so much sugar in it, and so people don't eat it. So usually we need 5 or more servings a day, and that's some of these diet trends tend to decrease our amount of nutrients and antioxidants. I mean, it really, truly is a vitamin, a mineral, nutrient, antioxidant in the food. It's far more superior than taking any kind of pill or supplementation. The deeper the color, the more flavonoids it has in it, the more antioxidants. The USDA shows an inverse relationship between high flavonoid intake and lower CRP. Yet again, vegetables decreasing our inflammatory markers. So it also lowers our IL-6 and adhesion factors, other inflammatory markers. It lowers heart disease, insulin resistance, and some cancers as well. Get those deep colors, get those deep melons, get those berries and citrus. So, I always tell people, if you have a sweet tooth, eat fruit, because again, it gets chalked up as, oh, fructose is bad for you, and it's sugar and all this other stuff, and then they end up eating a cookie as a dessert. I would much rather you eat a handful of blueberries than a cookie. I'd much rather you eat some figs, some dried figs or, raisins or something like that, than eating a slice of cake. It really should be a behavioral change, a habit, right? Try to do seasonal, try to do organic, and make sure if you are diabetic, you do have to restrict those sugars. You want to make sure and portion them off, just like you would. It's like a medicine. You're going to take a few of whatever berries as medicine, rather than you doing a whole bunch, like a container full of berries or something like that. Number 3. Eat whole grains. So when people say whole grain, they get really confused. They don't know what to eat. This one, the main crux of this is that if it takes you a long time to chew, the better it is. So let's talk about whole grains. Whole grains, were taken from the plant, the whole seed itself, and they're processed. What happens with the processing portion of things is that their bran is cut off, their bran is hauled off rather. And what's in a bran? What's in the bran itself is fiber, B vitamins, minerals, and then there is the inside part that's the endosperm. So this is where the carbohydrate actually comes from. This is how the seed, the germ, actually takes in this particular food and becomes a new plant. So we're eating, an embryo essentially. What is in the endosperm? There's some protein in there, low amounts of protein, but there are some proteins, there's some B vitamins, and the majority of it is energy for that seed to grow. And the inside of it is a germ. The germ portion has a nutrient-packed core, because this is what is going to help germinate the seed itself. There's B vitamins, there's vitamin E, there's minerals and other phytochemicals in there, and healthy fats for that little seed to grow. Well, in the processing of grains, the bran is hulled, and you end up with a refined grain that is not germinated at all. And basically what happens is all of these things in what is called fortified, right? We've seen this product before. This is a fortified product. This is a fortified bread. This is a fortified flour. It's no wonder they put all this stuff back, because they've removed everything from that outer shell. It's no wonder that processing portion of things. And usually people, really don't understand why they get stomach aches from fortified bread or wheat or other things, because some of it is just the added the actual vitamins that they put in there that hurt our stomach because they're not supposed to be in a natural form. So let's go through some things about whole grain. This is really not whole grain. These particular brands, they tout whole grain, they say all these things, but they really don't have anything that is of whole grain. They're still processed. This one is a ready to cook, ready to just really eat and swallow rice. I mean, there's nothing in that you could actually chew, because it's already ready to eat and overly processed. Cheerios is the same thing. It's flour. It's whole grain flour that's pressed into these O's, and they're already cooked and ready to eat. Wheat thins, maybe, I have to look at the back of this particular ingredient, but maybe wheat thins, but even then, it's probably processed whole grain. So why am I focusing on this so much? People have a really hard time of quitting carbs, and it's partly so. There's great energy behind carbohydrates and eating grains, but they end up choosing the wrong thing, and then they feel terrible still, and they ask me, like, well, what am I doing wrong? It's really, you got to be a qualitarian and ingredient watch. So what happens when we eat a carbohydrate is it goes into our stomach and we digest it, we release it out into the bloodstream, and we release out insulin, right? What I was talking about earlier in the beginning of that part 1 of carbohydrates and how they're released. So when we have how quickly it gets into your stomach and how quickly it gets in the bloodstream is a measure. It's called the glycemic load. And the higher the glycemic load, the worse the food is. And by removing that bran from that germ, it causes a 200 to 300 time loss of phytochemicals, and it causes an increase in the speed of sugar absorption, or an increase in the speed of glycemic load. So the more processed the carbohydrate, we've removed that bran, we lose phytochemicals, we increase the speed of absorption, we get an immediate increase in the release of CRP and cytokines in just eating one meal of a processed carb. And this is why the standard American diet is so terrible. That processed carb is the majority of, about 90% of your meal. And so if you're eating something that is of this caliber of horribleness, then inflammation ensues. So, I try to urge people to make sure that they eat real whole grains. And let's go through what that means. So these are whole grains: amaranth, brown rice, black quinoa, sorghum, regular, yellow quinoa is fine as well, teff, sorghum, buckwheat. And by the way, all of these can be ground and made into flour easily. And you can actually find Bob's Red Mill has a great products. I've got one example here of Bob's Red Mill that is oatmeal, but he's got a whole bunch of other things that have great sources of flour. This is millet. This is, these are some examples of, not maybe the best examples, but these are examples of organic pasta that is made out of whole grain. They're a little bit browner than the regular pasta. And basmati rice is another one that is whole, and you have to cook it. and you can make it a little bit more al dente, so you have to chew it a little bit more. Steel cut oats or thick rolled oats. This is Bob's Red Mill. These are great. He's got a bunch of flours of all these other things too. And Ezekiel bread, this one is sprouted. It's a great brand. And we've got another one, pearl barley, that's cooked and ready to eat. And you can buy this whole, and you can soak it, and you can eat it, cook it and eat it. So some of these are better and more frequently needed to be eaten, and then others, even basmati rice, we need to have a limitation on it as well. And that kind of goes to the whole grain carbohydrate choice continuum of how much you should eat certain things and how little you should eat it. So we talked about the fruits and veggies, and they usually get lumped in with whole grains, but unprocessed whole grains you should eat more of. You definitely should eat more of, and lightly processed. So we're kind of about right here as the continuum of where you should kind of stop, and you really should eat less and less and less of these things. None of this. This is complete poison. Please do not drink soda. So you really want to kind of look at, when we look at these particular products, like, someone was asking, well, you have this type of spaghetti on here. Is this okay, or is this equivalent to eating, amaranth seeds or pearl barley or something? No, it's really not. It's really, you should have a continuum of options, and the more unprocessed the whole grain, the better. The ones that are whole grain and are lightly processed, you should eat less of. So that can kind of, hopefully that makes a little bit more sense to everybody. With whole grains, you want to limit the portion size of the grain. You want to kind of limit it to what your daily caloric needs are. Whole grains, even if they're too much, can increase blood glucose and increase calories, do cause obesity, which in itself causes inflammation. So we do want to restrict our portion. We want to make sure we read the ingredients, and we want to make sure it doesn't have any extra additives. Make sure that your gluten-free options don't have a lot of extra additives in there either, because gluten-free, in order to make it feel like regular bread, to make it chewy or crunchy or whatever the textural form is, sometimes has a lot of additives that make the product unhealthy in the whole. So you want to kind of watch that. So number 4 is protein. And we want to focus more of our protein on plants. Eat more of the plant-based protein, and less of the animals. And that's just kind of a rule of thumb, right? If you have, we'll talk about the meats itself. If you have the meats, we'll talk about that. But let's look at the plants. Many of the studies have supported data that there are health benefits of plant-sourced or plant-based sources of protein, and it's a healthier alternative to animal plant protein. So legumes are high on the list. They're not only high in fiber, everyone knows that part. They're high in protein. They're high in iron and folic acid and vitamin Bs. There's a ton of different legumes. People usually think, here in the United States, usually people gravitate towards this brown lentil, and that's kind of what they think of as beans, and they usually think of red kidney beans, the only type of bean that they should be eating. Eat a variety of beans. Really eat a variety of these beans. Make sure you soak beans overnight, because they are a lot easier to digest. That fermentation process, overnight soaking of beans, help you digest the beans a lot better. You can take in a little bit more nutrients. You can get some of that germ that gets sprouted, and that becomes a different type of nutrient than you would with a dry. And yes, dry is better. Dry is healthier than the can. Some cans have only beans in them, but they do have other things. And again, we're doing another processed cooking at another factory. We're doing a process of canning, and the lining of those cans are now plastic lined. They used to not be, but now they're plastic lined, and you want to make sure that those are BPA free. So, canned alternatives, if you don't have any other ways, that is what you have to do. But if you can get dry goods, dry beans, and store them in a good seal tight container, it does last for a really long time if you don't have any bugs in there. So soak the beans, get dry as much as possible. Meats itself, you want to kind of avoid the processed meats. And somebody was asking, well, what's processed meat? Processed means, that they're in a facility or packed, like, for example, something that's like a general run-of-the-mill American hot dog is usually just a unfermented meat that's put into a casing. These are associated with cardiovascular disease and certain cancers and all-cause mortality. The reason is actually still unclear, and I kind of hold reservation with this because historical meat preservation was a necessity. I think it's gone to where the meat preservation, it's not about preservation, but it's just about having a very easy processed meat to eat. When we buy meat that is fermented, we try to buy the meats that are cultured, and these are kind of like prosciutto and things like that, the cured meats, and try to buy cured meats that don't have any added nitrates in them. Try to buy cured meats that have more of the spices in them. They are, again, associated with cardiovascular disease and cancers, but again, there's really no clear reason as to why. Is it because of that they have more fat in them? Is it that they're processed, or is it that because they're actually not fermented? They're just dead meats. So I try to look at good quality processed meats for that sense. Of course, the whole meat itself, try to buy whole meat that's organic or grass-fed, or free range when you can. When they're grain fed, they are fed the omega-6s, and then you end up eating the omega-6s from the meat. So that's the whole reason why you should try to get grass fed or free range, because the animal is actually out there eating what they should be eating. They're eating the grass rather than eating grain or corn. And always a good rule of thumb is try not to eat too much charred meat, as the charred meat or barbecued or overly burnt meat there is an increase in inflammation with that as well. Don't forget that there's other sources of animal protein. We talked about fish ad nauseum with the omega-3s, but there are also cheese varieties and cheese options out there. So this, again, in the standard American diet, cheese here in the United States is covered with plastic on both sides and single slice. That is not cheese. That is dead cheese. That is just a processed form of cheese. If you have a little bit of fungus on the cheese, that is not a bad thing. So a lot of Americans freak out because they eat dead cheese. They really don't understand what cheese means. And I've converted a lot of people to good quality cheese. Make sure that it's got good ingredients, things that you understand. Culture or rennet or things like that are found in natural forms of cheese. And if there is just a little bit of fur on it, just cut it off, throw it away, and eat the cleaner parts. Really, you're not going to go wrong with the hard cheeses that way. There are, some softer cheeses that you want to be careful with. Of course, pregnant women shouldn't be eating soft cheeses at all. But I kind of wanted to turn people on to other forms of cheese. There's goat cheddar, there's sheep manchego. So if you can't eat the cow itself because of depending on your heritage or your ancestry, you can do other forms of dairy like goat and sheep. And that is a historical ethnic diversity in humans that we have. So again, one last time, I want to make sure and say that vegans, this is a kind of a vegan alert. Veganism is not a sustainable lifestyle without supplementation. So plant-based living will restrict B12 completely. B12 is a necessary vitamin that is found in animal products. It is not found in any other food source but animal products, and usually vegans will need to supplement this way. Make sure that your dosage is correct. Make sure you get your physician to get you levels of B12. Make sure, and folate as well, and make sure that, you know, things like homocysteine, methylmalonic acid are also looked at. If you are an individual that has a specific gene, which is the MTHFR gene, then you may actually need to take a different type of B12 supplementation. So you have to be careful of these things if you're a vegan. Spice. Number 5 is spice. Remember to spice it up. People usually end up trying to eat healthy. They'll put a salad on, you know, they'll do a little bit of dressing, and they'll think that that's really what's going on, and they're healthy. They're not. They're so deficient in the spices that they're. This is another part of nature's pharmacy that you really need to tap into. An anti-inflammatory spices include turmeric and ginger and rosemary and oregano and cayenne, and they really have been studied to decrease inflammation. People think a spice is like spicy means that it's peppery or that it's irritating of the tongue, and it's not that. It increases flavor, it increases satisfaction, it increases enjoyment, but it also decreases your inflammation. So spices have been around a lot longer than there have been randomized controlled trials or research articles. And if we look to our ancestral heritage about how much spice has been used in different recipes and different types of areas of the world, then we really can benefit from these, right? So these particular spices have been studied, okay? That does not mean that other spices you can't eat. So these are the only things that have been studied, that have been proven that they decrease inflammation. Other spices can do the same thing. We just don't have enough data, enough randomized controlled trials or research articles, and enough academics out there to say that this is something that we should eat. In the Ayurvedic medicine, which is found in India and Nepal, every component of foods, oils, massages, it uses plant medicine. So plants, in the spice sense, are used incredibly for healing. Turmeric as a specific spice, there's been lots of different studies to confirm the benefits of the main component of curcumin to be equivalent to ibuprofen or diclofenac. And we went through that, right, for osteoarthritis of the knee. We went through that on that list of how curcumin actually works and how it actually decreases the arachidonic acid pathway and the COX enzymes. So turmeric has been used in Ayurvedic medicine and Chinese medicine for thousands of years. It has to be cooked in order to be released, and we have to understand that curcumin is a found active ingredient, quote unquote, of turmeric. And that's why everyone's on a curcumin supplementation. But remember my lesson of the whole plant is far more superior than any one of its components. Eat the whole root. Eat the whole root as much as possible. We find turmeric in the powder form in Nepal and India. We usually use that in food. If you live in a tropical climate and you can actually grow turmeric by the root, that's even more beneficial. Then you can grate the root and then put it into your food. The best way to cook turmeric, a lot of people think, oh, I'm gonna take turmeric. They usually put it in a tea or they drink it. It's not as beneficial. It will go into your kidneys and help benefit your kidneys and your genitourinary tract, but you actually need to cook it in fat to release the curcumin, or the active ingredient that is the anti-inflammatory component. So there's other anti-inflammatory staples in Ayurvedic cooking, which is ginger and onion and garlic that we usually eat together. And we know that garlic and onions help lower LDL levels and raise HDL levels. So it helps lower your bad cholesterol and helps elevate your good cholesterol. And, in a pinch, if somebody is really, really desperate and they want just some kind of table spice, then I would turn them on to Simply Organic adobo seasoning. There's a lot of unwanted additives that are in spices to increase shelf life so that it doesn't actually get lumpy. They'll put a lot of things in the mix to make it nice and powdery looking. You really want to avoid these things. There are a lot of additives in spices. You don't want to eat any of this stuff. So an example is to replace your salt and pepper at your table and add a Simply Organic, adobo. It has all the ingredients of, I think, turmeric and ginger and rosemary and oregano. It's got some garlic in there. It's got some salt already, and you can pretty much add it to, let's say, your eggs or something. By all means, add the pepper too. I just find that this is a really great spice for people in a pinch, and if they're wanting to increase their spices, it's a good introductory type of spice for them. Number 6, mindful mouth. So what does this mean? Mindfulness, people really get all bent out of shape about what mindfulness means. I think you just can't overthink it. Mindfulness means just being aware, having awareness. Put the phone down, turn the TV off, and actually look at your food. Look at what you're eating. This helps not only with portioning your plate, it helps to connect to your food. It helps to thank the person that made it for you, wherever they are. It helps for you to understand your connection with food and what you're putting into your mouth. Regardless of what the quality of, if you eat too much of your food, it increases calories. And again, increasing calories increases obesity. Obesity increases inflammation. So when we are mindful and we're looking at what we're eating and we're chewing slowly and we're turning off, social media in front of us, we can actually be able to understand that this is satisfying, this is enough. We can kind of finish our meal. So mindfulness in that meal and the plating, it's very, very important. Make sure you savor your food. Make sure you savor it with loved ones. Enjoy it with the people that you like. Always cook and enjoy food in a peaceful mindset. If you do it in a not so positive mindset, you can take that energy and end up upsetting your intestines and your general well-being. Another tip is to double your veggies and half your grains in this time period. And this mindfulness portion of things can really help you to plate and get you to that component. And water, I wanted to kind of mention that water component. Pre-prime your stomach with drinking a good 6 to 12 ounces of water before your meal, and then eat your meal, and then don't drink for another 30 minutes. Come back and make sure you drink and hydrate well. Make sure that's a good way to prime your food, prime your stomach, and digest your food better. Number 7 is Hanahachi Bu, and it's a if you can adopt this Okinawan philosophy, it is, the translation of it is eat until you're 8 parts full, which means that you eat only 8/10 of what you serve yourself. And the Okinawans are a very interesting group of people. They are a little island off of Japan where I think the people age into their 80s, 90s, and even hundreds. The highest number of octogenarians in the world are in Okinawa, and I think they know what they're doing by doing this. Some people ask me, well, what do we do with that 2 parts? What do I do with it? Is it just going to go to waste? Well, you can always, first off, when you're being mindful, when you're having a mindful mouth and plating, you can plate yourself 10 out of 10, but then you can reduce your portions and only plate yourself the 8 out of 10 of making sure that you serve yourself only 8 parts full. The other converse of it is if you forgot and you ate and you put too much on your plate and you're trying to be mindful and listen to this hara hachipu philosophy, then you can take it and give it to the birds. You can offer it to the birds. You can offer it to animals outside. We practice this all the time in Nepal. We thank the animals and our surroundings, and we give it to them. And the fermenters in your garden, put it in your compost. It's never going to go to waste. Number 8, eating fermented food. Our microbiome, we discussed in earlier in that part 1 portion, is, gut dysbiosis is rampant with inflammation and inflammatory disease conditions. Our microbiome is full of 100 trillion symbiotic microbial cells. There's more cells of bacteria that live in us than there are cells of our own body. Primarily, the bacteria live in the gut. 70% of it lives in the colon. The human microbiome consists of both the cells of us and the DNA of us and the DNA of the bacteria itself, and that is what's called metagenomics. And the microbiome has a lot of different functions. It not only helps with intestinal barrier function, so that is how when we eat, when food goes through us. So if this is a tube, food is going through us, it actually helps to keep pathogens away from the bloodstream. So it helps with intestinal barrier function. It helps with immune regulation. So we always think of bacteria as being bad, and being the bad guy and us giving antibiotics. But no, it's an actual delicate balance. There are pro-inflammatory bacteria and there's anti-inflammatory bacteria. There's good bacteria and bad bacteria, and we have to make sure we keep that in balance. And the mucus layer changes in composition and thickness when with microbiome stimulation and lymphoid tissue. But it also depends on the microbial colonization. So it depends on what bacteria are actually being housed in here to help regulate immune function. And tissue and organ homeostasis, well, the microbiome and these helpful beneficial bacteria can help repair tissue as well as contribute to helping with osteoporosis and bone remodeling. So there's bacteria that actually can help with to promote cancer, or actually to deter cancer. So we can modulate a lot of things with the microbiome. I wanted to mention that this intestinal barrier function, if there is dysbiosis or if there is issues with the intestinal barrier function, then we can have what's called a leaky gut or increased intestinal permeability. So I just wanted to mention that I do a lot of gut testing with my patients to make sure that they don't have that and other pathogens and other issues with their stool. So it's a stool testing that I do, which is a very big staple of functional medicine. The gut microbiome also helps with brain and behavior. The enteric nervous system is essentially called the second brain, and there's more gut. Our gut has more neurons than our brain does, and so the beneficial bacteria in fermented foods actually help aid in digestion and reduce inflammation and even make us feel happy. And getting a daily dose of fermented food to keep all these bacteria nice and happy is a really good idea. Make sure that you eat real fermented food. Make sure that it has good ingredients. And I can go through examples of that. Generally, you want to replenish it with food as much as possible. So here are some examples. There's kefir, which is a yogurt drink, and you can make this out of cow's milk or sheep's milk or goat milk. There's yogurt, which is very easy to make in your home. There's sauerkraut. There's kombucha, which kombucha's kind of taken a spin as far as how many different types of companies there are. You want to make sure an ingredient watch, and they're all really good ingredients in there. There's wine or mead. There's there's beer. And, you want to make sure and ingredient watch the alcohol as well. There are a lot of alcoholic products out there that don't have to actually say, in the United States, say what is in their ingredients. They're not required. The FDA actually does not regulate here in the United States alcohol. So it's the Department of Treasury's Alcohol and Tobacco Tax and Trade Bureau that regulates aspects of alcohol production, importation, wholesale distribution, labeling, and advertising. So they can put whatever they want in their products. And it's kind of alarming. There are a lot of additives in alcohol that people really don't even know about. And they think that they're doing something healthy relatively, and they're not. And with alcohol, you want to make sure you get the right portions. Wine and beer have great polyphenols, and that's an antioxidant, but you want to make sure that you want to stick to the low to moderate range. 1 for a woman, 2 for a man is beneficial. But I just kind of wanted to put that out there, that you want to make sure and get some good quality alcoholic products if you're so inclined. I talked about ingredient watching. You want to make your own if you can. Not everybody can, but if you were really inclined to do that, I love Sandra Katz's book, Wild Fermentation. It's a really great book on how to make fermented products from all over the world. And again, fermented products are ideally served with each meal. And if you really can't do the fermented meals, fermented portions of your meal, and you're in a pinch, people always ask me what kind of probiotics they should take. And it's usually look for products in the billions or billion CFUs. Make sure you get something, that's in the billions. Make sure you get something on sale. Make sure you don't get it expired. Make sure you, it doesn't matter if it's frozen or, in the cold section or over the counter. But really, food is best. Really food fermentation is best. And here's some examples of how you should eat it. You want to make sure you're eating a pre, pro, and syn. So what is a probiotic? A probiotic is something that has the real fermented food in it. Eat more of these. So real fermented foods like the ones that I showed you, some things that I didn't, were kimchi, giardiniera, which is an Italian mix of pickled mix. Miso paste is another one. Remember to make sure you ferment your beans and grains before you eat them. Sprout them if you can. Prebiotics are things that the bacteria will eat, things like garlic or onions or leeks or sunchokes or asparagus or an unripened banana or chicory or flax seeds. There are a long list of prebiotics, and when you get them together and you make a meal out of both, then it's even more powerful. So eating something traditional like dal bhat tarkari atzar, which I put it all into one word, which looks really silly. There should be spaces in there, and that's an error on my part. Eating something like that already has the atzar in it, which atzar is a fermented food. Kefir with an unripe banana, or kombucha with some chia seeds inside of it, a yogurt with flax seeds or raw honey on top, a miso with onions, leeks, and asparagus. These are great combination foods that you're eating something with the bacteria in there, eating something that the bacteria eats, which is a prebiotic, together. So you want to kind of do this dish at least at every meal. If your intestines are so inclined that they are hyper mobile, then you want to kind of cut back on that. If your intestines are kind of on the not as mobile side and you get more constipated, you want to go err on more of the fermented foods. Number 9, eat traditional food if you want. If you have a traditional food in your heritage and you want to pull that out, please do. The Mediterranean diet is a diet that has a backbone of the anti-inflammatory lifestyle, right? Of eating. It's a pattern of eating. It's not a collection of recipes, but everyone's cultural heritage is different. I'm from Nepal, and this is what's called a Nepali thali. A thali has all of these components. It has the dal, which is a lentil, in each meal. It has a bhat, which is the rice, in each meal. It has tarkari, which is vegetables. So all of these are the vegetables. We have one starch, we have one greens, we have one cauliflower, and we have maybe a curry dish. And it's got the atzar on the side. So we've got a couple of atzar. One is tomato based, and one is, it looks to me like daikon root based, and then a little bit of fresh vegetables on the side, a little cut of lemon. This is our traditional heritage. We eat this for the most part twice a day, every day. And not everybody has this to lean on, but if you want to lean on a specific heritage, lean on somebody's cultural heritage and look at that. If you look at it, traditional food will follow this pattern of anti-inflammatory eating and an anti-inflammatory lifestyle. So you could pull that Okinawan, heritage. You could pull an Italian, traditional, classic Italian heritage. You can pull on Scandinavian heritage. Any of these things you can pull on to eat traditionally, because when you eat traditionally, they will follow this pattern of eating, of anti-inflammatory lifestyle. Number 10, it's not just food. You've got to remember that. We talked about a little bit about that mindful mouth. This is going to expand on it a little bit more. Make sure you exercise. Recommended is about 30 minutes 5 times a week. If you don't like this, exercising the traditional way, you can chop wood, you can garden, you can even put on a Fitbit and clean your house and look at how many steps you have. Once you quantify it, you do feel better. It's not just about food. You want to make sure and reduce stress, right? This is different than the number 6 of mindful mouth. This is actually a global stress reduction. Whether you call it meditation, whether you call it prayer, whether you call it breathing or journaling. Some people, don't like the religious aspect. Some people do. Some people think the bathing ritual is enough for them to stress reduce. And some people like self-massage. They all have a way in which people, there's so many different ways in which people can reduce your stress. So decreasing stress decreases inflammation, decreases cortisol, decreases inflammation. And it's not just about food, it's about sleep. Sleeping very well. Does it have to be 8 hours a day? Not necessarily. Everybody's different. Try to turn off lights at sunset. Try to avoid gadgets in your room. Turn on a natural candle if you can. The intensity of the light of a natural candle soothes your brain better. And you will sleep like a baby. I want to turn everybody on to this habits of biphasic sleep. Humans, when left without any lights, artificial lights in the evenings, will end up having a biphasic sleep habit. This 2-phase sleep habit, we basically wake up in the middle of the night, do a little bit of a task, and go back to sleep, is a natural human occurrence. And I just want to kind of point that out to people that are quote unquote having insomnia. And number 10, it's not just about food. This should say number 10, it's not number 12. It's about caffeine reduction too. Try to reduce your caffeine. Caffeine is a mind-altering substance. It's found all over the United States. It's abused a little too much. There are anti-inflammatory benefits of coffee and tea, but people end up abusing it by just doing the caffeine. So try to stay, limit it and abstain past noon. Cacao is a great substitute. And speaking of cacao, number 11, bonus, is treat yourself to chocolate. Cacao has high amounts of flavonoids and fiber. It has a reduction in serum inflammatory markers. It has improves lipid profiles and enhances endothelial function. There's a reduction in insulin resistance. There's a reduction in diabetes incidence with cacao consumption, and mortality data are limited, although the one epidemiological study indicated that an inverse correlation between chocolate consumption and cardiovascular and all-cause mortality. So cacao is a wonderful substitute for coffee. It is a fruit. Very delicious. Here's the seed pods. Once you eat the flesh of this, we generally don't even see this in the United States. The seed actually gets taken and it gets dried and crushed and made into chocolate. So eat real chocolate.